O God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be pleasing in your sight. For you are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Now, before we get too far, I want to just do a quick unscientific survey. So just by raise of hands, how many of you have already taken down all of your Christmas decorations? You've put everything away already. Oh, wow. Okay, a lot. And how many of you, like me, will be doing well to take them down by Valentine's Day? Yes, good. You're in good company. I think that's totally appropriate. As long as you stop celebrating Christmas by Ash Wednesday, which is Valentine's Day this year, then totally liturgically appropriate. Now, I also have a theory, though, and so let's try this again. Put your hands back up if you've already put all your decorations away, and keep them up if you also have a cat. Okay. So you are refuting my theory that it's the cat people that take their decorations down first. You know, I have a dog, and aside from him thinking that the low branch ornaments are dog toys, he doesn't care at all about the Christmas decorations. There's no knocking the pieces of nativity off the counter or, carrying off the baby Jesus, which is what the cat that I grew up with would do. Baby Jesus would just go missing from the manger, and we'd find him several days later in the cat food dish. Unharmed, she was very gentle. But anyway, I just think that's so interesting how we, some of us just keep on celebrating. And one of the things that I love most that I'll continue to experience probably until after Valentine's Day is the holiday cards that we receive at my house. And I'm not sure that we made an intentional decision to participate in this holiday card culture when we started a family, but since my husband and I have had a child, so for the last 15 years, we've sent out every holiday a picture of ourselves to all of our friends. And that's kind of a weird tradition, if you really think about it. But it's also a great time to sit and reflect on the year and think about everything we've experienced and to look at years past and see how the children have changed and how we are aging. How many more gray hairs are in this year's picture than the last. And as time has gone on, we've just added more and more people to our holiday card list. So now we send out several hundred every year. And as a result of sending out so many cards, we get a lot of cards too. And it's my favorite part of the season, going to the mailbox and taking out these cards from people that we maybe haven't seen in person for decades and seeing pictures of their families or reading long, newsy letters about what they've been doing through the year, or from others just receiving warm wishes in a beautiful card. And I love going through those cards not only when we receive them during the Christmas season, but also again in the new year, and just reflecting on all those relationships and the gifts that they've been to my family, all those people that have spoken into our lives in one way or another, helping us to be the people we are. Of course, I have a little tension with this practice too, because we, like most families, try to put our best foot forward on this card, and at times it can feel a little disingenuous. For example, I had coffee with a friend right after Christmas, and I hadn't really talked to this friend for a couple of months when we got together. And as soon as she sat down, she said, "Listen, your Christmas card was gorgeous. I mean, if all I have to go on is the Christmas card, I'm thinking this family is crushing it. You've got it all together. You're beautiful and you love each other and you get along, and even the dog is calm and obedient, and the sun is shining right down on your heads. According to your Christmas card, you're doing awesome." And I just had to laugh, because we are not crushing it. I mean, we're doing fine. We enjoy many blessings, but our kids also fight and yell and slam doors in our never quite as tidy as we'd like it to be home. And we occasionally have existential crises, and we are worried about our aging parents. And we're worried about the state of the world and whether it will even exist for our hypothetical grandchildren. And some days, all we are is two stressed out parents in a messy house. And yet we send out this photo in which we are happy and carefree and beautiful. Is it completely honest? I don't know. But I'm also pretty sure that's the photo our friends are hoping to receive. That they want us to look like we've got it all together. And maybe that's, at least in part, because they're hoping they'll look like they've got it all together too. And I think about that when I read this story from Luke's gospel for today. It's the only little snippet we get in all four gospels of the Holy Family when Jesus is an adolescent. We go straight from the baby Jesus in the manger to the grown-up Jesus starting his ministry, except for this one story. And we get this adolescent Jesus in relationship with his earthly parents in Luke's gospel. And I think what we want, what we're hoping for, is a beatific image of the Holy Family, one we can all model our families on. And that's not what we get here. What we get is a picture of a real life family, of kind of a bratty teenager and two stressed out parents. And I wonder if, in a way, that might actually be more helpful for us in the end. But before we get too far into that text, I want to make sure we've got the context for this story. So we're in Luke at the end of chapter 2. And if you'll remember, a lot is happening in the first two chapters of Luke. So in chapter 1, we've got angels foretelling the births of Jesus and John the Baptist. And Mary famously goes to visit her cousin Elizabeth. John the Baptist is born. And we've got two famous songs in chapter 1. Mary's song, which we call the Magnificat, and Zechariah's song, which I cannot remember the Latin name for that right now. But it's great, and you should read it. And then in chapter 2, we start with the birth of Jesus, and we get the angels and the shepherds that are in all our nativity scenes, whether the cat has carried them away or not. And then there's a story that we often skip over. And that's when Jesus is still an infant, and Mary and Joseph, being devout, law-abiding Jews, take the infant Jesus to the temple to be presented. And when they get there, they meet this very elderly, very devout man named Simeon, who has been waiting to meet Jesus his entire life. And when he sees Jesus, he says, "Now I can die in peace because I have seen the salvation of God." And he takes the baby in his arms and he says all these incredible things, and he blesses his parents, Mary and Joseph. But then he says to Mary, this child is going to be part of the rise and fall in Israel, and he's going to do amazing things, but a sword is going to pierce your soul too. And we go straight from that to another wise elderly person in the temple, in Anna, who sees the baby Jesus. And she starts talking about the redemption of Jerusalem and praising God. And after this very dramatic event, when these strangers in the temple have spoken incredible things into the Holy Family's lives, Luke tells us that the family just goes home to Nazareth. And Jesus grows and gets stronger and wiser, and the favor of God is upon him. And that's all we've got until today's reading, which is about 12 years later, when the Holy Family makes the annual pilgrimage to Jerusalem for the week-long festival of the Passover. And you might be interested to know that the women and children were not required to go to the Passover festival in Jerusalem, so that the whole family went would show just how pious they are, just how faithful, that Jesus is grounded in this Jewish community in a meaningful way. So they've been in Jerusalem for the Passover for about a week, and when they get ready to go, Mary and Joseph leave, and they don't realize that Jesus isn't with them. And that makes sense because this is one of those times, maybe like a time when you were growing up or your children, when kids just went from household to household and you didn't worry about them until it was dark outside and you went out and yelled for them to come in. Or these pilgrimages might have looked more like big community vacations or like church retreats, where families kind of intermingle and kids tend to make their own tribes and do their own thing, and you don't worry about them because you know at least one responsible adult has their eye on the kids at any given time, even if it isn't you. So Mary and Joseph didn't even look for Jesus until they were a full day into their 90-mile journey. And then nobody knew where he was. And I know you can imagine the distress, the terror in a parent's heart. To have come so far thinking your child is with you and then to discover he's nowhere to be found. Mary and Joseph weren't just anxious. If we look at the Greek in this text, they were frantic, distressed, as you or I would be. Not only have they lost their son, their beloved, but also he was supposed to be the one who would rule like the great King David, the one who would bring salvation to the people. I can only imagine some of the conversations that must have taken place between them on their way back to Jerusalem to look for Jesus. I wonder if there was some finger pointing and some you should have's. Or perhaps they said, God never should have chosen us. We have no experience raising children, and we certainly shouldn't have been trusted with the Son of God. And they searched for 3 days. 3 days. And then they found Jesus in the temple, sitting with the scholars and the teachers, asking questions and answering them, amazing everyone. But you know who wasn't amazed? Mary. She wastes no time saying, "How could you do this? How are you just sitting here having theological conversations with strangers and you never thought to even send us a note to let us know where you were? Do you not know how worried we have been? I have not stopped sobbing. Your father hasn't slept. Is this what the old man meant when he said a sword would pierce my soul? Because Jesus, this is what it feels like a sword in my soul." And Jesus doesn't even acknowledge her distress. In fact, he sounds pretty bratty when he says, "Didn't you know I'd be in my Father's house?" Jesus sounds like a cocky teenage boy. Not quite what we expected after learning about him in Sunday school. And if I had been Mary, I think I might have lost my mind and maybe embarrassed myself in front of those religious scholars in the temple, because I would have done a lot more than treasure all those things in my heart. And maybe she did yell at him. Maybe she grounded him for a year. And maybe that's why the text says when Jesus got home to Nazareth with his earthly parents, he was obedient to them. But the gospel doesn't tell us any of that. It just ends this story the same way it did the one before, saying Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in divine and human favor. And what do we do with that? Maybe if we're parents or grandparents of adolescents, we might say, "Ha! It's not just my kids. Jesus acted like that too. And then we can pat ourselves on the back for being at least as good at parenting as Mary and Joseph. Or we might do what my husband and I regularly do when our kids are testing our patience. We remind ourselves that the way they're acting is actually developmentally appropriate. That they're trying to establish their identity and their independence, that they're testing boundaries because it's all changing as they mature. And the ways they push us away and forget we even exist and then beg us to drive them somewhere with their friends is all appropriate as they figure out who they are. And who had more to figure out than the adolescent Jesus, who had earthly parents but was also the Son of God, who was discovering at age 12 that he had a special gift, that the prophecies he had heard about were right, that he was destined for great things. But what would that mean for him? As he tried to work out his identity as the Messiah, the Christ, it bumped up against his relationship with his mom and dad, probably more than this one time that we read about. And I'm moved that even Jesus, the Anointed One, knew that he had some growing to do. That he didn't understand everything yet, so he stayed behind in the temple to learn from those who were a little further along in their journey of faith. And as Methodists, as Wesleyans, that's what our life of discipleship is all about. Growing in faith from wherever we are. Whatever is developmentally appropriate for us. Just taking each next step toward perfection and love, one after another, for our whole lives. I think it's interesting, too, that Jesus did this in the temple, where people had always recognized things in him that he didn't necessarily see in himself. Even things his parents hadn't necessarily been able to articulate. And when we want to grow in faith, I dare say when we want to find Jesus, we come to a similar place. Now, the Jesus we find here might not be exactly what we expected, but he'll be here. And so will a community full of wisdom and insight, one that can help us know who we're called to be, if we're willing to ask questions and answer them, to speak and to listen, to learn and to grow. This is a place that we can honor our roots even as we depart from them, where we can find God even if our family circumstances are difficult, whether we are crushing it or just barely holding it together. So there's a lot for us in this story, a lot more than just Jesus being an adolescent boy frustrating his parents until they want to pull their hair out. So take what you need from it today. If what you need is encouragement that you can find Jesus if you're willing to look for him, start that journey now. If what you need is a reminder that your family situation doesn't need to look like any model to be holy and fruitful and beloved, look at this story and remember there are no perfect families anywhere. But Christ Jesus enters right in the middle and redeems them anyway. Or if what you need is a little motivation to work on spiritual growth this year, look to Jesus, who actively nourished his faith, even though he was born with it. Or if what you need is assurance that God can speak through you, whether you're as old as Simeon and Anna or as young as Jesus, the cocky adolescent, That's here too. And in a lovely twist, all of it happens in the religious community. What Jesus called the temple and what we call church. The community that you are for one another. It's here that you see each other and call gifts into being, where you honor each voice, where you speak hope into each family, where you grow together day by day and year by year. Even if you have struggles as a church community, I tell you, you are crushing it. So in this new year, may God continue to bless you with wisdom and divine favor, just as God blessed Jesus in the temple, and blessed him, and blessed him, and blessed him, until he saved us all. Thanks be to God. Amen.